Hello, hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into the Odd Thoughts Podcast. At the Odd Thoughts Podcast, we like to talk about the everyday odd thoughts, have conversations on relatable topics, and discuss whatever comes to mind. My name is Gunther, and I am your host. Welcome to episode 31. For episode 31, I kind of started off by talking about wholesome videos on YouTube, social medias. I love literally scrolling through and seeing cute, wholesome, sweet, happy videos. So I thought I'd give a shout out to wholesome videos. Then I transitioned into talking a little bit about rejection, or more so kind of facing rejection. We want to feel accepted in a lot of spaces, and we hold a certain vulnerability when we put ourselves out there. And when we're not accepted or we have a certain rejection that we face, it can be hard. And there's a lot of feelings that can come with that. Then I had a little fun talking about maybe the possibility of alien contact. I think it's a it's a fun thing to think about aliens and other life forms out there in the universe. And I don't think it's necessarily an impossible thing to think that aliens maybe do exist or other life forms do exist and maybe they've traveled here to Earth to come visit us. Then I ended on talking a little bit about accountability. It sometimes is going to be hard to make the right decision always. And when we make wrong decisions or make mistakes, we got to be able to take responsibility or have a certain accountability for that. You don't want to be a person to deny or shed blame. So it's important to take a little accountability for things. So if you want to listen to any of these topics, I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for stopping by. Please enjoy, all that good stuff. How's everybody doing though? I hope everybody's doing okay. I love everybody for stopping by as always. I appreciate everybody tuning in as always. A truly strong-willed person is someone who can lay a firm foundation of beliefs with the bricks of spite others have thrown at them. What you do and how you live may not always look alike to others. People don't know how to handle their own thoughts and own beliefs at times. Sometimes that leads to an outward attack on what you do. All that matters is that you're doing what's best for yourself. Let the words and judgments that people give fuel the strength to move forward. As other people want to spite you and other people want to point out your flaws, make that just a reason to stay so steadfast in what you want to do and how you believe in what's best for yourself. As some might people are just going to be that way, right? They're going to kind of point a finger and be a little judgmental of you. But you got to allow others to be them as you wish that people would allow you to be you. You're doing you. You're just doing what you can. And like I said, if people want to have a problem with that, just let that fuel the fire. But nonetheless, thank you for stopping by, everybody. I really do appreciate everybody for stopping by. I'm doing okay. Um, I've definitely been struggling a little bit though. I have to be a little bit real with that. I've been generally pretty happy in my life and my day to day, especially I just things have been a little bit more clear in my vision. I just think that I feel a little bit better about who I am as a person, and I feel that it's starting to come along. My mental health is never going to be perfect or completely cured, but I'm doing a lot more to make sure that I feel good about the things that I do. But lately, I've had a lot of questions about kind of just myself. I just find myself I want so freaking much out of life and hold so much weight to things that I want that when I kind of let myself down, it just hurts. I have this like I want to reach for the stars type thing, right? I want to shoot for space, but it's hard sometimes thinking about how hard that landing might be. It's kind of like, I wish for greatness or something like that. I wish for a little success and I just want to be the best me as possible, but I'm kind of holding myself back because I don't want to fail. And I don't know. I mean, failure is only going to fuel the fire to like hopefully improve myself even more. But it's hard not to sit there and be a little tepid and a little timid and think that I may not be successful. And there's so many factors, just not like in my own mind. I'm very judgmental of myself, and I quite often kind of put a microscope down on the things that I do. Like I said, I put a lot of weight on certain situations, and I want the best for myself. I think everybody does. But that's kind of conflicting because I know that not nobody's expecting that from me necessarily. Not in a not in that like I'm not capable of doing that, but people just want you to be happy. Or they generally just don't care about you. Or they just got their own thing going on. So I kind of feel like I'm already like being judged for nothing. Every time I do something, I'm already thinking that it's like the wrong step and it's not what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm not in the right place here. I'm not in the right place there. I just confuse myself too much with that. I block myself from doing so much because I'm already predetermined that I'm not going to be willing to do something or be accepted to do something. And then it feels like I'm a little hypocritical when I kind of then sit here and I say that I want to do great things. I want to have a great podcast, and I want to be more creative, and I want to use my creativity to, do something with. And, I just want to be known in the best ways possible. But I mean, I'm not doing anything proper. I mean, I've got the podcast and I'm on social media at least. And I know that like I said, there are times I know that I'm generally in my day to day life, I'm taking forward steps. I do feel better about myself and I do feel more capable, but I can't help feel it a little bummish at times. I'm really right now in my life. I'm trying to really hone in on the podcast and not just the podcast. I'm really trying to hone in on my creativity, and I just have this idea that I can do something a little bit greater. But I gotta initiate things. I gotta remember that you gotta put in the work. It's just work I've never done, truly. But I know that we all struggle with a little bit of that idea of greatness, and whatever your idea of greatness may be, we all want to do something better. We all want the best for ourselves, and we all want to put ourselves in the best situations. So I know I'm not like alone in those thoughts, right? I just gotta know that I kind of gotta be a little free willed with it a little bit, where I'm just gotta take the weight off my shoulders, and I just gotta start throwing stuff at the wall, and hopefully it starts sticking. So that's what I'm gonna start doing. I'm right now. I'm trying to get my podcast on a certain schedule to where I usually always do 2 days in between uploads, but hopefully with like I'm gonna start doing Monday, Thursdays, and then Tuesday, Fridays type thing, and then just alternate that so that that Thursday to Tuesday I have 4 days in between, and maybe I can get ahead on podcasting, recording a few episodes, and maybe that just gives me time to just start throwing throwing everything at the wall and see what sticks. But yeah, let's move on. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Let's step into episode 31. Some of my favorite videos to watch on social media or YouTube or whatever is wholesome type videos, like wholesome content or whatever. I just love seeing like family reunions or soldiers coming home or just, kids being cute little kids. I just sit there for like hours and I just scroll and I scroll, and I really do appreciate a little warmth and a little happiness in my heart once in a while. Sometimes it's kind of hard to see the videos when tears are coming out of my eyes, but I can't help but torture myself a little bit. I think everybody likes to see some wholesome content once in a while. It's nice to have a little bit of that, like I said, a little bit of that warmth thrown into your day or thrown in in between sometimes the very bleak news that we might read. I know that I love feeling happy. That's a huge thing is I always I love seeing other people happy too. There's just something about just people smiling and just laughing or just crying with like tears of joy that makes me react the same way. I can't help it. I think I just want to feel good. as I typically everybody wants to feel good. And I sometimes think I live vicariously through people. So when I see a video on YouTube or whatever social media, and it just makes me feel sweet inside, you know. And I try to really ingrain as much of that content in my feed on whatever I'm watching it on, you know, those videos on. I try to ingrain those type of videos as much as possible. Try to like maybe watch if it really hits home, you know, I might watch a video a few times over. There's just I just it's the innocence. I just think sometimes there's certain wholesome content that just feels so in the moment and so natural, and it doesn't have to be like a big grand gesture, right? It's just sometimes even like just seeing your kids doing something cute together, and you can't help but film it, and it just makes you feel good, makes you feel warm. I love seeing like one of my favorite type of videos is the soldiers coming home type videos, or just like any of the like reunion type things. You know, haven't seen your mom in a few years or your siblings in a few years. Those ones feel like the most sweet and just generally the most like innocent and just most wholesome to me. I love it. It's just like it's like normal day stuff. It always just feels like it's your everyday normal things, and it gives you it at least for me it kind of gives me a little hope that truly good things do happen for people and do happen for me in my everyday to day life, even when I'm not necessarily looking for it. I love just I've always had a really good relationship with my siblings, and there's always been a lot of love. So I feel like a lot of times that when I watch just cute babies, you know, being cute sibling babies interacting with each other, just laughing, playing their own game, those ones really touch my heart the most. I can't wait to have kids one day, and I always say that I'm gonna have like twins first go. I hope I do, but at least I'll have a few kids. If I don't have twins, I'll try to have a few kids. But I just think about all those moments that'll happen like that where I'll get to see it. I might not always film them too, right? So just thinking about like even just seeing that happen and feeling at least having it in my mind, my own mind video. You know what I'm saying? But also like I watch a lot of like the scholarship videos. I feel like I catch those ones a lot where kids, you know, college football players, basketball players, whatever it may be, like when they get the full ride scholarship, you know, started as a walk on, working a job, you know, barely kind of making it to practice on time and trying to do your best at school, and all that work does pay off. And I just love, you know, how excited everybody else is too when people get the scholarships, and if the parents are involved or some of the families involved, it just makes it a little extra sweet. It really does. Or just like college acceptance videos too, right? It's just cool to see people in a pure like happy moment, just like in that joy, that pure rush of joy, the big smile on their face, you know, laughter. You know, I'm very like laughter is very contagious to me, and like I said, smiling too. I can't help but just to grin when I see other people doing the same, or just like sometimes I'm not necessarily. I'm not gonna. I cry when I see people cry with joy. I don't cry when I see people crying with sadness. Always, sometimes, but it feels like in those pure like tears of joy moments. You know, I get a couple of them too. I do cry with sadness, but it always feels like when it's sparked through another moment. You know, it's not when I'm like seeing someone else react to a real life moment. But the joy, it always sticks out a little more to me. Makes me feel like I feel a little more connected when it's a happy moment. It's just I can't help but I think we all can't help but to feel a little bit attracted to those type of videos, right? We all want to, like I said, we all kind of want a little bit of happiness, and we all want to feel good and have a little joy in our life. And we're not always going to necessarily get these kind of cute, clean, sweet moments, or you're not going to always be able to capture them or remember them in the moment. But it kind of gives you a little bit of that faith that things do genuinely happen. Good things do genuinely happen. It's gives you a little hope for goodness in humanity and each other. And when you're in that kind of mood where you're a little bit depressive and it feels like it's a big time slump in your life, I just hope that even just seeing a video maybe gives you a little bit of a spark that maybe it puts that energy in the world that something good can come of it. Come of it. I don't know necessarily like what's good and when things are going to happen for people. It feels like it never happens when you truly want it, but I know I hold on to that faith. And I mean, I don't always need the wholesome, good, sweet, happy videos to help me remember that. I know that I've had good moments in my life and I've gotten to experience good moments. So it's just one of those real life scenarios, those little aspects that happen through your life that kind of give you the reminders. Even like when I see people in real life happy, right? It's just a beautiful thing. So you whether it's through video or actual physical interactions in public or whatever, it's just nice to see. And I watch I watch tons of different types of content on YouTube, social media. I watch scary videos a lot, and sometimes you catch a couple of like the car accident videos and some of that not so great content. So when I get a nice, sweet, wholesome video in between, or I get a good stretch of them, it's nice. It really gives you a break and gives me a little bit of that mood booster that I felt like I was missing. Maybe I didn't know I necessarily needed, but I'm very thankful that I got. But I know everybody everybody gets those wholesome videos on their feed, and I think all of us can enjoy a wholesome video every once in a while. And why hate happiness? Rejection can be a pretty difficult thing to deal with at times. If facing rejection is not always the easiest thing. Sometimes we want to feel accepted in certain spaces or accepted by other people just or feel capable at certain things, but we just open ourselves up, right? That's all we can do. And with specific scenarios, sometimes we give a certain vulnerability. It's just kind of what we do as humans. And sometimes inevitably as well, when you are rejected by something or whatever scenario by someone, it can shatter certain emotions that you kind of have connected to that vulnerability. We antiquate emotions to certain aspects of our lives, and when these emotions feel disregarded or rejected, maybe in some sort of way, it's never a good feeling. But rejection is just one area that doesn't equal to other areas. Just because you are rejected in one specific scenario doesn't mean it's always going to happen. Acceptance is always found elsewhere. Rejection can teach us a little bit about our abilities to handle such moments and to accept them, and hopefully move on somewhere where rejection may not happen, where we feel most accepted. But like I said, it's not easy facing rejection, and especially when you feel like you want to be accepted by people or a specific person. Maybe like you want a certain job or something, or you want to pick up a certain hobby and it's just not working out, or you just feel it's just not responding the way you think it is. In term with like the emotions that you do put into things, or at least you feel that maybe not necessarily emotion, but certain feelings. You know that you've been able to, you've always been able to get along with a certain type of person, or you've always been welcomed in certain spaces and been capable of certain things. That can be kind of a real thing to have all of a sudden that be shattered. It just doesn't work out, and all of a sudden you're facing rejection by someone, whatever the situation, whatever reason it may be. Who knows, right? It's so different with it. It's such a multitude of different things that you can face a little bit of that rejection in. And inevitably a lot of times it's going to be kind of blunt, right? It's going to feel a little bit of rude, a little harsh. People don't always respond to you kindly, or you're not always going to respond to things the same way, right? So it kind of feels like that's the nature of things. You're not always going to necessarily feel accepted in a certain space. So when it pushes back kind of hard, it's difficult to get. It's definitely difficult to deal with. it can feel sometimes even really just so unexpected of a response. And some scenarios are always going to be kind of easier than others, for sure. I don't, it's rejection is always going to be one of those very human aspects that we live in our existence. So you kind of look at one part of life and you with whoever it may be, what you try to be accepted by this person or these people, be accepted into this space or this job or whatever, or whatever this, like I said, whatever the scenario may be. It's it's always, I think sometimes it's not always going to be hard. Like I said, some things sometimes it's going to be a little easier than other times. I think you could also face maybe a sort of gentle rejection. Not everything will be that harsh. I can't, it's too, definitive to say it's always going to be a very rude thing or a very blunt thing for you. But sometimes you kind of get let down with with a kind rejection. You're not always just going to be accepted in certain spaces, or it's just maybe not the right timing of things, the right moment. I think that's a big thing to remember is that it's not necessarily that you're not accepted. It's just that it's just not your place. I guess that's part of an acceptance thing, but you shouldn't really feel like it's a attack on you in any way where it's, you're just not able to do something or you're not capable or wanted. Sometimes it's just a little too different or you're a little too different of something from something. And even though you want it or you feel like you can be capable of it or you feel like you can handle a certain situation or scenario, it just like I said, it just might not be that right moment and not be the right it might not be the right timing. People are going to have, other friends and be in relationships. So when you get rejected by someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're unwanted and that this type of person or these type of people are never going to want you. It's just not in that moment. You're not you don't get a job that you wanted or you're fired from a job. It may not always mean that you're like incapable of all jobs, right? It just means that this wasn't the right job for you. So, but it's inevitably a hard thing to face. It's sometimes feels like there's a judgment either you're casting on yourself or it feels like that you feel like people are spraying or spreading that judgment to you. It's not always a judgmental thing. Maybe sometimes it is like I said when it's a little rude or harsh of a response, maybe you do feel like it's a little bit of a judgmental thing. You might kind of get that mentality of like, "Oh, well, what do you think of me? Why are you rejecting me? Why am I rejected? Why I have these qualities, da 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 da." But sometimes it's not even like it's not always like that. So you got to open your. I think there's a nature of you got to open yourself up to whatever in a certain way. If you feel too set up in a mindset that because you were rejected in a certain scenario that means you're forever rejected by everything, then I think that's kind of displaying always a shutout scenario for yourself. And it's uncomfortable to sometimes open yourself up to all these different aspects. We don't always know capability and we don't always know where we're going to be most welcomed if there theoretically is a most capable scenario or most welcome scenario, but sometimes there's a nature of just keeping yourself open. It's also kind of a learning process. It's when you get rejected, it's like I said, it's not necessarily an attack on you as a person and an outright judgment of who you are and what you can do. Sometimes it's just how things play out. Being vulnerable is a very, very, very difficult thing. Open up that vulnerability to situations and it comes with certain emotions. So when things shut you out and reject you, it can feel very evasive in a way. It can feel like things are kind of crashing down on you, and you then don't want to be open or vulnerable to anything. Which I think like that's just not the way to think about it. When you start to then just close yourself off to all scenarios, and you then don't think you're going to be wanted by anybody or capable of anything, that's just a tough mindset to get down into. Makes you not want to be open at all. I know that's something that I face. It's something that I struggle with when Sorry, something I struggle with very heavily. Sorry, I struggle with rejection a little bit, and sometimes I open myself up and I try to be very vulnerable. And I think by nature, I sometimes am a very open person. I just don't always know when to put myself into certain situations, but inevitably, when I try to put myself out there and I put out that vulnerability, and rejection comes, it's hard. It's never an easy thing to necessarily deal with. I know that it's just like just because it's one place or it's one specific moment that it's not. I just got to learn that's more so that that's not going to be the outline for everything else. I know that I'm accepted as everybody else is. It's not going to always be in maybe places you necessarily want, unfortunately. That's always a big thing. But or at least maybe something you had in your mind for yourself. But it's just keeping yourself open up to the nature of situations. Like I said, like sometimes it has to be a little bit of that uncomfortableness. You got to face rejection a little bit in the way of, well, thinking of how you're going to run into a wall, and you're not going to run through the wall. So unless, you stick your head down and maybe you do go through the wall. You don't know unless you run into it. But that wall is very real. So rejection is the wall, and you just got to go for it. That's something I tell myself so hard, so much, and I'm so harsh on myself about is is I just got to be so forward. I got to push myself. I got to do what's unknown and what I've never done before, and I got to be a little confused, and it's hard. I've been when you're impacted heavily by certain situations you've been rejected in, it makes you feel just generally confused about things for sure. And I think we all want something really badly, right? It's when you think you want to know someone, you want to have a certain friend group, you want to do a certain task, a certain job. You really do want to do it. You feel like you deserve it, or you feel like you really truly need to do it. It doesn't hurt to perceive yourself as more capable of things, and it never hurts to actually think that you are wanted. It's you kind of have to put yourself into that mindset a little bit that you are going to be accepted in certain situations, and if it's not here, then it's going to be there. If it's not, this job, then it will be this job. I don't think it's a bad thing to feel that you're more wanted or more capable. It almost is like you kind of give yourself a little bit of that confidence in a way. You almost got to feel like even though you've never done something and it's very unknown to you and you're a little confused in how you do something, you kind of just got to act like you can do it and that you're in the right position at the right time. Like I said, I mean, it's rejection's not equating to all aspects. That's a big thing that I always remember is that just because I didn't get along with these type of people, I wasn't able to do this. That doesn't mean I'm not able to do other things. Excuse me. But there are plenty of other opportunities, places, people that will give you that acceptance for sure. It's hard to sit around and kind of pick your battles in a way, but you're gonna have to at times. You're gonna have to through certain rejections and certain times where you're not, the response is not how you want it to be, and you're not maybe quote unquote welcomed in certain spaces. Then you start to learn that, like, well, if I'm in contact or close proximity to a similar scenario, that maybe I know that I'm not going to be able to handle it, or maybe I know that it's just not going to be the right moment. But also, that's a big thing is that maybe down the line you'll get accepted into the places or with the people that you were once rejected from. It kind of feels like it only makes acceptance a little nicer when you finally do find a place for yourself and you opened yourself up and it was actually a little bit of a responsive thing. I think it makes that acceptance a lot nicer. Rejection is it's just a learning. It's all a part of learning. I know that it maybe even gives you a little bit of that I don't know, like a meter of how capable and how wanted you are. But sometimes you could just be, you just hit a certain, certain what like or a certain moment in your whole life that it's just a certain amount of people or a certain type of people come in and a certain type of jobs and certain type of things happen to you. So, sometimes maybe waiting for that shift to happen, right? Rejection just just calluses these emotions in you, and it can make it a little hard, and hard calluses that maybe never heal. That's a tough thing, though. I know that I think a lot of us will respond to maybe being a little bit closed off in certain moments. We're not always going to feel like we can push through and feel the most confident. So rejection does feel a little hard, and it does harden us a little bit. But I think it does teach you more so self awareness. You kind of get to know that you're able to do a certain thing, or you're welcomed in a certain space. And when you're maybe rejected multiple times in a specific scenario, I think that can kind of maybe tell you a lot. I think you have to be conscious of what self awareness is. You got to kind of listen to yourself, and sometimes you want to lie. You want to lie to yourself, right? You want, like I said, you want to feel a little more capable, a little more wanted, but things are sometimes just so unknown, and you're just not gonna know. But that should never keep you tepid and timid in the first steps you take into trying to do anything. Like I said, if rejection is a wall, maybe you got to run at it, and you probably bounce off of it, but maybe you run through it. You don't know unless you go head on into it. Don't go head on into any walls. Don't take it as a literal interpretation. But we're gonna face, I think, rejection throughout our whole lives, and we might have like a string of rejections, and that might follow up with a string of acceptance. Elsewhere, there might be acceptance just waiting for you, and learning through rejection is a big thing and definitely a part of human existence. It helps you know a little bit of your capabilities, and it definitely points to your self-awareness as a human being. In my last episode, one of the topics I had talked about was the idea of habitable exoplanets. And kind of one of the sentiments I had touched on was that it's kind of a cool idea to think about maybe the existence of life outside of our own. We kind of think of them as aliens or whatever, but it's kind of cool to think about maybe over the millions of years that the universe has existed, billions or whatever, that other life forms have been created and have lived. And quite possibly, you know, maybe they have visited Earth, maybe through different stories, different tales that people tell, sightings, whatever it may be, going back like hundreds of years on here on Earth. It feels like it's kind of a plausible thing that maybe we have been contacted by aliens, or just whatever other life that it is, whether they're called aliens or not. We just call them aliens. Maybe they've already come and contacted us, right? Like I said, it's been over hundreds and hundreds of years. Tons of people, different societies, all over the world have kind of made up stories, or not made up stories, but have told stories of otherworldly visitors coming in spacecrafts and offering up knowledge or helping with yada yada this, yada yada that. And with like the expandingness of the universe, it doesn't necessarily seem that impossible, but also kind of makes you think about maybe because of how vast the universe is, that maybe like if there were other life forms that we would just maybe would never come into contact with them. So like when we think about like the pyramids or something like that, or we think about people talking about otherworldly beings coming to Earth, teaching them things, it's hard not to think about it's being like aliens. 'Cause what else would it be? We don't know. We weren't there, so all we have are people from this ancient world from hundreds of years ago and stuff like that, thousands of years ago or whatever, telling stories. And I guess people can always make arguments through these other immaculate structures around the world, and even like in human evolution itself, that there was like a certain alien type of race that came down and intermingled with like prehistoric humans or whatever. That's always kind of a weird conversation to have. But one of the big things is people always talk about, like, especially with like the first-handed accounts, people talk about just UFO sightings. People talk about seeing like spacecrafts coming in and out. And that's a kind of interesting thing to think, that why would you even want to come to Earth in the first place? I mean, Earth is a great. I mean, to us, the people who live here on Earth, it's a pretty great place. I mean, it's not bad. We got a lot of beautiful things, but if there were other life forms in a theoretical sense, kind of doing what we do and living in their own societies, then what's the curiosity? It also kind of raises a question of how advanced are people? That maybe people have truly kind of been so ahead of us and have had thousands and thousands of more years to advance, that that's just kind of like the natural progression of what things happen. Maybe one day, even in our own kind of society, our own human race, that space travel becomes plausible. We'll be the aliens on other, newly formed planetary systems, because there's stars that form new systems as all the time, kind of theoretically as we speak. As I was talking about in the last episode when I was talking about habitable exoplanets, there's tons of planets and our stars that we all of a sudden start to discover, like different like shadows that form around them, and when you start to analyze it, that these could be possible planets, not necessarily habitable planets, but planets nonetheless. And but the universe is so freaking big that even when you do, like, obviously it's very plausible and almost seems like it's an impossible thing not to accept that there is life out there, that you have to kind of almost accept the fact that through the vastness of the universe, that maybe we'll never come into contact with other life forms. There's something called the Fermi paradox, which is that that because of how big the universe is, that with how there's definitely a possibility of other life, but there's just maybe no way of people coming to of other, life forms coming to contact with each other, when we know that literally 1 light year is 5.88 trillion miles, and that there's billions of stars out there that have these planets. It just seems like things are so far away. Even in our own, Milky Way, our galaxy, things are so deep and so far. It just kind of thinks it just like makes you think that you'll never come into contact with other things. Kind of a scary thing to even think about. Maybe if there is a plausible thing, other life forms, other civilizations, what are they doing? Do they have kind of the same thoughts, right? It's always the idea of there's a stream of consciousness that generally kind of goes along with certain living beings, whether it's here on Earth or, otherworldly beings. We just don't know because we haven't seen them or merely made contact with them, as far as we know. But it's just, if other civilizations, other life forms have been around for way longer, thousands of more years, then what is it? What's to say that interstellar travel isn't a real thing that can happen? You think about, like, even right now in our present time, Elon Musk trying to get to Mars feels like it's going to happen within however many years. So who's to say that there isn't an Elon Musk in another galaxy on another Earth doing the same thing, or has already done it, and it's been a thing. So when you think about the aspects of through time already being visited, that kind of maybe seems like a thing, especially if there's been thousands of years of life before Earth. That when they came and visited these ancient people, they're kind of like, whoa, like that's how our people looked a million years ago. That's just unbelievable to think. It's it's even like I was reading something that said that even to explore the Milky Way itself, it's going to take like a few million years to truly traverse the Milky Way as a whole. So we can't even traverse our own galaxy in a sufficient, amount of time that who knows if human life is really going to survive a few million years. Who knows what history is going to be, right? As we don't know what prehistoric humans did and we don't know about that stuff. So in a few thousand years, our current history is just going to be forgotten like seemingly most history. But maybe we are the only humans. You ever thought about that, That maybe we are maybe it's just we are the only people and people just got some creative imaginations and they think they've seen stuff, but it really wasn't anything. It would be it's kind of a terrible thing to all of a sudden discount like hundreds and thousands of years of tellings of aliens, right? Or of otherworldly beings. I keep saying aliens because that's the popular term. I don't want to offend the otherworldly beings if they listen to this. So, but maybe that is a thing. Maybe it's we are the only humans, and maybe the visitors that we've had are just humans in the future. Maybe humanity just kind of has continued so long that we have a interdimensional type of machine or just like that that's actually what space is like an is like interdimensional travel. I watched the movie Interstellar when Matthew McConaughey goes into the fourth dimension or whatever the heck. That's a terrifying that was terrifying. Think about being caught in some sort of limbo forever. I mean he wasn't caught there forever, but you know what I'm saying. Maybe there's like a life here though on our own universe. Maybe we've always thought that these planets are inhabitable and because of certain extreme conditions and whatever else. But maybe there has been life that has existed already. Not humans like us necessarily, but whatever, maybe some microbiologies or whatever. And see, that's just amazing. I just think because of like how we are here on Earth, like we are people, that makes it plausible that there's other life. But I don't know why people would. I don't know why other life forms would want to come visit Earth. Just besides the, advancement and curiosity and abilities that other civilizations have developed in space travel. And truly, even when we think about just the sightings that have been reported, maybe there's been others that haven't. Truly, maybe there's been like millions of visitors and we just never really discovered them. We've met a few people that also act a little alien-like, so so maybe they've been here for all these years. No, I don't even know what they would look like. I mean, or like, what do aliens look like? I don't want them to be like the xenomorphs in Alien. I don't want those aliens. But if it took me a little ET, yeah, I can deal with that. I mean, a little Yoda. I could take those type of aliens, but I don't think I could take on I don't think I could take on a xenomorph, man, or a predator. You know what I'm saying? So it's even like we just think we try to think about it, maybe even save our own mental ease, try to picture the most fragile little being. But maybe they're just like us. Maybe it's just literally other humanoid figures that live in another galaxy that have been around for so much longer, and that just makes it makes me curious at least. I don't know about y'all, but it definitely makes me curious. And hopefully that maybe if one day there's an actual like, contact that maybe we actually do make contact and there's some sort of peaceful, hopeful meeting, that's a good thing. It wouldn't be a bad thing to learn from another advanced civilization. Or maybe we can show them things about their history that they have long forgotten. That maybe that we as we exist now was part of another life form's history, but because of how advanced they have become, that it's forgotten. We'd hope it'd be peaceful, though. I mean, at least I'd hope it'd be peaceful. Maybe we have a space treaty. We could trade goods as it feels like the Earth as we do. Why we trade with each other? Why wouldn't we trade with other planets and other galaxies? It makes sense. I know that if it wasn't peaceful, you better sign me up for the Men in Black. I'll be Will Smith. See if they ever make a new Men in Black, sign me up. We don't need Will Smith. Me and Tommy Lee, we can hang out. Tommy Lee Jones specifically, not the drummer Tommy Lee. But that's even a one thing to think about is the Men in Black, right? People have their own theories about these black suited individuals that come in when there's been these weird, extraterrestrial going ons. That's I don't know. The government's not going to tell you everything, so it's not far off to believe that there's a secret that, or even if they haven't been busy and however long, maybe they're just they're part of the Men in Black department, but they've just been sitting around, and it's not that exciting of a job. They go to a couple reported sightings, and it's just like taking note. It always makes me think of the movie Paul, where these investigators are just kind of like investigating. They're just doing detective work until obviously, I guess until the movie end, like towards the end when it becomes exciting. But I don't think it's that weird of a idea or even a concept to think about the possibility of other life forms and if there are other advanced life and there's been thousands of other years that life forms have been able to, advance and civilizations have existed, maybe they've come and, contacted us. Maybe interstellar travel does become a possible thing and maybe we one day become the alien visitors on some other ancient planet. I have a belief in, certain otherworldly beings, right? Maybe they haven't come. I don't know if I believe that necessarily, but I kind of believe that the world is so big or the universe is so big that it's kind of hard to maybe think that people or will other life forms will ever come in contact with us here on Earth. As a normal human being, we have many flaws. We do have many wrongs and we make many mistakes in our lives. We're not always going to be ready for what comes our way, and in turn, we make wrong decisions. Often maybe harmless in nature, but when we do make a wrong decision, I think it's kind of important to sometimes own up to that decision. Take a little bit of accountability for it. Like I said, you might not have bad nature in it and it's something that you just didn't know and you responded wrongly to. But I think it's not a bad thing to take accountability in those wrong decisions. The choices you make can sometimes be harmless, but it can hurt you or it may affect others. Admitting you've made a mistake is only a step in the way of accountability. Denial or shedding blame is only going to make it harder and it's going to bring a little bit more misfortune to you. It'll make it harder for responsibility to be accepted. We're going to make mistakes or know that there's going to be wrongs that are going to be done. And whether that's kind of something that you find out by yourself, right? You feel like you put yourself into a certain situation or you just kind of think you're going to respond correctly to something and you don't. Or maybe, it just wasn't what you expected out of it. Sometimes people like to tell you that you're wrong. That's a big thing. And it sometimes can feel a little bit called out, undoubtedly. But nonetheless, there is some sort of accountability to take for it. I think there's no doubt that sometimes it can be somewhat emotionally distressful. And it feels a little judgmental whether that is kind of a thing that people are putting towards you or you're putting towards yourself, right? You don't ever want to be wrong, and people don't ever want to feel wrong or be called out for being wrong. But that doesn't necessarily definitively mean that you're wrong on everything else. I think a little bit of accountability is just admitting that you are wrong about something, right? And through a process of there's never gonna be a good timeline for it, but through some sort of process, you're hopefully gonna right that wrong. Admission is always that first step. Undoubtedly, you have to kind of sit there and be very real that you weren't very ideal in how you responded to something. The decision you made for whatever scenario it wasn't ideal, or at least it just didn't have a correct or at least the response you had in your head, not necessarily correct. is definitely you definitely don't want to be the sort of person in denial. Mm. There may be that initial kind of denial of, well, I thought I was right, and well, I thought I was able to do this, and I thought I did it right, but you don't want to then start to shed the blame off, especially like when you start to shed the blame onto others in a way that can becomes just a whole jumble pile of mess. It just becomes harder to then accept responsibility or for people to accept that you made that wrong and that you are admitting to it. People want, I think everybody wants to be right in a way. And so when have been called out, it's hard to then just immediately say, well, I'll just make it right then. Especially when you say so steadfast on something. You got to take responsibility though. And it's not necessarily in a way of that you're a bad person, you need to be responsible for this thing, but responsibility is something you take in an everyday to day thing. It's almost in every single aspect of your life. So when it comes to decision making, you have a responsibility to try to make the best decision possible, whether it's kind of the most right for you in a way or just kind of whatever in whatever way it may be. So you make a wrong decision, you got to take a little responsibility. Have a little bit of that accountability. Like I said, it's not always bad. It's not always like when you made a wrong decision, you're the worst person, you're stupid, you're incapable. It's not always that. It's really maybe even never that. It's just sometimes we're not super capable of every single scenario. There are so many unknowns and so many scenarios where we're just gonna have to wing it in a way. You're just gonna have to kind of think about, well, this is the only thing I can think of in the moment. So I think there's sometimes a lot of scenarios where we're put into those situations, and then sometimes maybe accountability doesn't necessarily matter, but sometimes that wrong can build up. I think, especially like that steadfastness on something wrong, right? You don't necessarily want to be that person who's super hard headed on something you've done wrong, so on, so wrong. You don't want to then just think, oh, there's no truth to it. Especially even that when you've done something wrong doesn't mean that it can't be made right. Amends can be made. Amends is needed for wrongs and mistakes. Like I said, you don't want it to build up into something bigger where it's kind of a snowball. You don't want that then to lead to like more wrong decisions because it started with this one wrong decision. Like I said, it may be harmless in nature when you first kind of decide something, and you just like I said, you're not always gonna know. So it may be harmless and you just kind of put something out there. You say something as fact or truth, or you say something as reality, but it's just maybe not necessarily what it was or not what it is. But sorry, once accountability sets in, once you kind of realize that, well, a wrong needs to be righted. I've made this kind of mistake. I've made this wrong decision. So and so wrong decision. I think that that truth, fact, reality is really all that matters. It kind of doesn't matter that you were wrong before. Big thing of making amends when you're wrong is that once you're right and once the truth kind of comes out, that's what people are always going to kind of remember. And so hopefully you especially will try to ingrain that. And that's all you're going to kind of remember. Eventually, like you'll shift away from that mistake, and it's part of that learning process that you then maybe will be able to avoid that mistake or catch it so early on that you haven't let it snowball into something bigger. There's a whole question, I think, sometimes in the willingness to accept. I think, like I said, when you get called out or it's kind of a very unexpected response to something, and all of a sudden you've been made out to be wrong, it can make willingness a little hard. It can make that acceptance of responsibility, of accountability, pretty difficult to take. To own up to something is not always necessarily to own up to wrongs is just part of being normal. I think it's not necessarily it doesn't make you a bad person, right? It's just part of what makes us normal. Sometimes it is just as easy as like a whoops. Sometimes, but if you sometimes it isn't, right? I got to be pretty real and say that you kind of make a certain choice at a certain time because you think it's best. And you kind of thought it was going to be a pretty innocent thing and just comes down pretty hard later on. And maybe at first nobody's kind of pointing any fingers at you, but maybe there becomes a time to where it does happen. There was never any timeline, I think, sometimes to when a wrong decision directly affects you. And then when you make amends to that wrong, there's no timeline on when it's going to work out. Sometimes things kind of stick in a way that your wrong decisions kind of hold on to you. And that is an unfortunate thing. You got to be, even when you take all this responsibility, you take a little accountability. I think sometimes there's a little judgment that still puts upon you, whether it be from outside forces or yourself. But I think there is a part of feeling a little bit better inside your mind that you've been willing to accept this responsibility, accept accountability. And hopefully it maybe gives you even a open mind to knowing a little bit more of that fact and reality. And maybe it helps you then pursue that you're going to be a little bit more thoughtful in certain decisions you make, and you're going to try to do more just in certain choices. Do your best to kind of then maybe even spread that truth. I think that's a big thing is like you can always transform that accountability into something greater. Not just it's just owning up to something isn't going to always cut it. It's that first step. It's, admission is the first step, but you have that process of then what can I do further? Well, I try to accept that truth. I try to accept that there is a better way to do something, a more right decision. Then, even telling others and trying to spread that certain reality. I think that's a big thing is when you've learned a lesson, why not try to teach other people lessons? You don't got to make people look stupid to do it as people don't got to make you look stupid. And sometimes situations do make you feel a little silly, but I think it's everybody do everybody feels a little embarrassed and feels a little silly when they do certain things. But when you make wrong decisions, I think everybody kind of feels a little guilty when they're a little bit wrong. Not in everything. Some wrongs are kind of just a part of life. So you're not always, especially when you're so unknown on something and maybe pretty confused on something. Truly, a decision might be pretty harmless. Truly, but leading it to accountability just leads to other things, and accountability leads to accountability in other things. I think you start to right a wrong here, and you start to right a wrong there, then maybe that kind of gives you a little bit more of a clear vision on how you can accept yourself into responsibility. That it's not a hard thing, and people are only going to, like I said, point a finger truly when you kind of feed into the denial and you start to like really base everything on that wrong decision. That's when it's going to become most notable is when you're really feeding into it, denying it, shedding the blame. But wrongs are just going to be part of, I think, what we do as humans, right? I'm not going to be able to ever always know what I'm going to, the right decisions to make as everybody else. So when I do make a mistake and I've decided something wrong, whether it is harmless or maybe sometime it comes to bite me back in the butt a little bit, you got to learn that taking responsibility and having accountability for certain things is only the first step into making the wrong a right. I think the only thing we really should know are the truths and facts and try to be best connected to reality. I don't want to sit here and deny that I made a decision. I don't want to blame I don't want to shed the blame at all. I got to make sure that I'm only controlling my own decisions. And truly, that if I hurt myself or I hurt others, it doesn't really matter in a way that you still have to take that responsibility. It's your due diligence as a person to have truth and have fact in your life. So just know that you can always make amends for wrong decisions by taking accountability. Alrighty, friends, that's really all I have to say about that. I appreciate everybody for tuning into episode 31 of the Odd Thoughts podcast. If you want to listen to this episode or any of my episodes, I always post them on YouTube or Spotify. If anybody ever finds anything I ever say relatable or you enjoy anything I say, then I appreciate any support I can get through subscribing to the podcast on YouTube, following me on Spotify. You could also follow me on I have other social medias as well. You could follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'll make sure to have those all linked in the description below the video, as well as like on my channel description. But I appreciate everybody for listening. I always love the chance to get up on the microphone and talk to everybody and just kind of get down into a comfortable position and just always trying to encourage people to have their own discussions. And while I'm saying something, pause and just talk along with me in a way. Just, it's always cool to vocalize thoughts. But, anyways, I love everybody. Thank you for stopping by. Make sure to show up for yourselves every single day and be excellent to each other.